Good morning. This is the June 2023 block party, and I'm going to show you today how to make a variation on Delectable Mountain. So it's a very easy block to put together, and when you make two of them, you get this nice little mountain effect. You can also alter the block just slightly, and you get another block that has a little more interesting shape around the edges. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this. First of all, you're going to start with a square of paper. This is a paper piece block. And what we're going to do is first I need to find a pen. This is essentially a half square triangle block with a stripe down the middle, but to make sure that that stripe is exactly where you want it, we're going to paper piece it. You can make the stripe any size you like. For this block, which is a 6.5-inch block, I'm going to use a 1-inch stripe. So I'm going to put my 1/2-inch line in the corner on each end, and then I'm going to draw my line. Turn it around and do the same thing. 1/2-inch line into the corners. I'm making sure my 1-inch line is aligned with the line I just drew. I'm going to make my line. Okay. Now, this is 6.5 inches, but I need to cut squares of fabric that are 7 inches. So I'm going to cut two 7-inch squares to be my opposing corners on the block. I'm just going to stack up my fabrics, and then there we go. Two 7-inch squares, and I'm going to cut them from corner to corner. These are slightly oversized, so if your cut isn't perfect, there's plenty of extra fabric here to work with. All right, so I've got two triangles. One I'm going to put on this side. One I'm going to put on this side. And then I'm going to put a strip of blue down the middle. Okay. So when you're paper piecing, it's important to number your pieces. Now, for something this simple, you don't really have to, but this would be number 1, number 2, and number 3. That's the order that you're going to place your fabric and sew them. So the first piece is going to go here. But in paper piecing, we always work from the back side. So I'm going to align this, and this strip I've cut so that it is slightly wider than the area here. I've left a 1/4-inch seam allowance on each side. Actually, this, instead of being 1.5 inches, is 1 5/8 inches. So I've given an extra 1/8 of an inch just to allow for a little wiggle room. All right, and I'm going to put it right side down. I'm sorry, wrong side down. I'm lining up my edges so that I have about 1/4 inch showing on each side, and I'm going to pin it in place. It's important that you work from the drawn side because that's where you're going to sew your lines. Okay, just like so. And now, let's see. There we go. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to take one of my other fabrics. I'm going to lay it right along the edge. I'm lining up the point of the triangle with the point down here, and I'm lining the edge up with the edge of my block, and I'm going to pin this in place. Making sure that's nicely aligned. And I'm not pinning really close to the seam allowance because I don't want to have to worry about stopping and removing pins. All right, let's go to the sewing machine. Now you want to use a straight seam, but you want to reduce the stitch length to 1.5 millimeters. That will allow you to tear the paper away easily. All right, and you're going to sew on the side with the drawn line. I'm using an open toe foot so I can clearly see where that line is, but you could also use a stitch in the ditch foot and just run the guide in the middle of the foot right along that line. All right, it's pushing that pin, so I'll take that out. Right, now you can remove all of your pins. I'm going to open this out, give it a little finger press, and then I'm going to use the other half of my triangle, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pin this one to the opposite side. Again, I like to make sure that the corner is kind of pointing in the corner. If it's not exact, it's okay. There's enough extra room here to get this in there. All right. And I'm going to pin again. I didn't go through the paper on that one. All right. All right, turning it back over. Again, I'm sewing on the paper side. Let me see. I need to move it over just a smidge. Okay. Take out my pins, and now I can press this open, and there's the beginning of my block. I'm going to take this to the pressing station. I'm going to press it open, and then I'll show you where we go from there. And I'm just pressing that flat. All right, now we're going to trim it. I've got my finished block. I'm going to turn it over so I can see the paper, and see, this is what I mean. I left plenty of extra all the way around. I'm going to trim so that I am just exactly on the edge of the paper, and just trim that all across. You don't want to cut the paper, you just want to cut right next to the paper. All right, and there we go. Our block is nice and trimmed up. So measure your block, and because we've paper pieced this, these lines are perfectly centered, so you're going to be fine. So measure the block. This one's 6.5, and you want to divide that by 4. Okay, so 1 5/8, which is just ever so slightly more than 1.5. And I'm lining up that mark on the edge, and I'm going to cut the block. Now, it's important to note that this block is, the stripe is going in this direction, from upper right to lower left. You're going to make more blocks like this, but you're going to turn the stripe this way and make the cuts. Let me do that to show you before I continue. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got a few blocks sewn together, and you can see they're all exactly the same. So I encourage you to sew all of your blocks together first, and then separate them into 2 piles, 2 equal piles. One pile, you're going to have the stripe going this way. The other pile, you're going to have the stripe going this way. And just set them aside, and then you can cut your blocks into quarters. So for me, that's 1 5/8 because I have a 6.5 block. All right, so there I've got my 4 pieces, and now all you have to do is swap the first piece and the 4th piece and the 3rd piece and the 2nd piece, and you're going to end up with this block, and you just go ahead and sew those together. Okay, I'm back at the sewing machine. Now we can set our stitch length back to 2.5 millimeters, and we're just going to take our segments, right sides together. You're not lining up any seam lines, so you can just stitch. Oh wait, you know what? I want to use a 1/4 inch foot though. Take my next pair and do the same thing. remember that was my first one, that was my second one. So we're opening them up just like so. And as long as all your stripes are going in the same direction, I'm sorry, you can't see that. So my stripes are going in the same direction, and my dark fabric's on one side, my light fabric's on another. I'm going to go ahead and put these two units together. And I'm just going to stitch. And this is what the finished block will look like. Now you'll notice it's no longer square. It is a rectangle, and that's okay. That's what we're going for. So I'm going to make the other half, and then we'll come back and take a look at it when we're done. Okay, so before we cut the second block, I want to make sure you understand the first block is here. We have the dark on top, the light on the bottom, the stripe going this way. Okay, the second block we're going to orient the same way. The dark on top, the light on the bottom, but instead of the stripe going this way, now the stripe is going that way. So what happened is before our block was oriented like this, and we cut it this way. Okay, see the stripe is going this way. When we alternate the sections, the red is going to move to the opposite side. So that's why the red's over here, or the dark's going to move to the opposite side. The important thing here is you want this block to look like this block, but the stripe going in the opposite direction. And then we're going to cut it this way into 1 5/8 sections. Well, I haven't taken the paper off. Well, I'll do that after I make this cut. Okay. You can take the paper off on the individual sections. That's fine. It's just easier if you take it off on the big section. Okay, going back to our block. Now, 1 5/8. And again, you can make these blocks any size you want. As long as it's divisible by 4, and honestly, everything's divisible by 4. It's just some of your fractions may not be as nice as you would like. So, okay, so now we have our block. We're going to swap 1 and 4 and 2 and 3. So can you see now that this is the opposite of this one? So I'm going to put it on my mat over here, my little ruler, and I'm going to cut the other one. Okay. 1 and 4, swap 2 and 3. There's my block. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I am going to sew this pair together, and then this pair, and then put these two together and do the same for the top. So I'll end up with 2 more blocks that look like this, but going in the opposite direction. So I'll be right back after I've done that. Okay, so I've sewn my blocks together and I've pressed them. And now what I have are 4 blocks, and you can put them together with the light mountains, or you can put them together with dark mountains. And when you're putting your rows together, you can do them like this. So you end up with kind of, well, it looks like a Seminole piece design. Or you can alternate them. Oops, so you've got light mountains and dark mountains going across like so. So here's a light mountain, there's a dark valley, here's a light mountain. There you go. There's a lot of different ways you can put this together. Now, again, as I mentioned, the finished block is not square, it's a rectangle, and this one measures 5 inches by 6.5. Okay, if you wanted to make this a square block, you could even do something like this. Hold on. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can put this together. But if you wanted to make this a square block, what you would do is you would take a pair like this, an alternating pair, and then you would turn them like this and cut them into quarters like this. Swap the end pieces, swap the center pieces, sew them back together, and what you'll end up having is a block that looks like this. So the little points aren't going to match. They're going to be like little jagged points, kind of looks like lightning. But then when you sew 2 of those together, you're going to end up with a block that has like little lightning edges on the side of it. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this block, the variation on Delectable Mountain, and we'll see you soon. Bye.